Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play Forest Shuffle by Lookout Games. Now this is a very simple game to play, but there's a lot of options. There's a lot of scoring options. There's a lot of different routes you can take. There's a lot of different abilities that you could potentially get. And so it's not super simple, but it's definitely strategical for sure. Very strategical for sure. And sometimes a little bit lucky as well. You'll understand when I start talking about how to score points and what scores points and stuff like that. So let me get started by showing you how to play this game, the basics that you should know. Now, everybody's going to start with 6 cards in their hand. You're going to play with a certain amount of cards. If you're playing a 2-player game, 30 cards get removed from this stack, and they have been because I've got it set for a 2-player game. So if you were playing a 5-player game, the stack would be just a little bit higher, obviously. So that means it's going to limit certain cards. There might be some cards that aren't even in here because they just happen to be, you know, one of the 30 cards that got removed from the game. So it's possible you might have one of the few animals in the game that, you know, only one of them exists in here. That's a possibility. And each card tells you how many cards there are in the deck total. So there's always a lot of trees. So this one tells you there's 10 trees. This one tells you there's 3 wood ants and 4 goshawks, for instance. This one tells you there's 3 of this species of bat and 4 European badgers. This one tells you 4 tawny owls. This one tells you there's only 2 stag beetles. That means if you get this, you might be the only player who gets to play the stag beetle if you are going that route, that strategy, that advantage, that ability. Because it could be one of the cards that get discarded. Now, of course, if you're playing a 5-player game, no cards will get removed from the game. So that means there will definitely be 2 stag beetles in the game. But if you're playing with less than 5, there's a possibility you might get one of the only cards that, you know, you might get a card that nobody else gets because it's the only one in the whole, you know, deck of cards here. So that's something to note, especially when you pay cards in this game, or should I say discard cards. That's something to think about. How many are left potentially in here? Is it worth doing? That kind of thing. Okay, so I explained, obviously, you know, how you can tell how many cards are in the game. Now, the way this game is going to work is there's 2 different actions. One of the actions is just drawing 2 cards on your turn. If you draw 2 cards on your turn as an action, that's it for your turn. Simple, right? Easy, just drawing 2 cards. Now, you can draw from the deck, or you can draw from this forest clearing. In the beginning of the game, there are no cards face up in the forest clearing, but as the game goes on, as you see how to play this game, you'll understand that there will be cards in the forest clearing. Okay, but as you draw cards, eventually you're going to get close to the bottom of the deck. Now, the way this game works is you basically have to separate all of these cards into 3 piles about even. And then the last pile, one pile in particular, you'll set aside and you'll shuffle 2 of these winter cards into here. And they'll randomly be in there. So you don't know where they are. And then there'll be 1 card placed on top of that last deck. And then the other 2 decks of cards will be put on that 3rd one. Okay? And the reason for that is it will randomize how long the game is going to be. Okay? Because if you knew exactly how many turns there were in the game, you could plan so much strategy so way ahead into the future and pull off a whole bunch of powerful moves, right? But if you don't know when the game is going to end, if you just don't know, then it's hard to play the long game, if you know what I mean. It's hard to play the long game if you don't know when it's going to end. Because you see, the thing is, as you go through all of these cards, eventually you're going to get this Winter is Coming card. Now, the first one you see does not end the game. But you'll notice it says, if this is the 3rd winter card, the game ends immediately. Otherwise, place this card next to the clearing and draw a new card from the deck in its place, whatever. So if an ability allowed you to draw a card and it was this card, then you get to draw another card in its place, for instance. Okay? That's how that's going to work. But that does mean that the game is almost done, because look, that's how many cards are left, and that's how many we went through. So it could be over before you know it. And, you know, as we go through here, we're still going through here. It's still, the second card still hasn't shown up yet. So that means we still have some time. Oh, there it is. There's the second card. So it's still not over yet, but you know that once you see this, it could be over immediately. Or it could be over in a couple of turns, or a few turns, depending on how many cards are being drawn from here. But, you know, it could be the last card. This card here could be the winter card. You just don't know. So you really, when you see the second card, you really want to make sure you play the cards you want to play the most and get that over with, because you probably won't be playing very many turns after the fact. And let's see, we're still going through. It could have easily shown up right now, but it still hasn't yet. That third winter, oh, there it is. And how many cards were left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This game, it would have ended with still 7 cards left. That could have been way more than that. It could have been 20 or something like that. We just don't know. You just don't know when winter is coming. Sometimes it just comes a little sooner some years than others, right? Isn't that how it works in real life? It seems 1 year it snows in November where I live, and then the next year it doesn't even snow until like January. Or sometimes it doesn't snow at all. But point of the matter is, it's always going to be a little different when it starts snowing, right? And that's kind of the theme of the idea of how the game is going to end. That's kind of the theme, okay? So now when you play a card, the first thing you have to do is you have to play a tree into your forest, because you can't play anything else until you have at least a tree in your forest to play. So let me find a tree to play. Let's see. How about this beech tree, for instance? Now, it costs, in order to play this, I have to pay another card from my hand. So if it was a 2, then I'd have to pay 2 cards. If it was a 0, that means I get to play it for free. But this one makes me pay a card to play it, okay? Don't worry about the scoring. Don't worry about the acorns right now. But yes, so let's say I play this into my forest, okay? Well, then I have to pay a card from my hand. So, I like a lot of these cards. So you know what? I'm going to discard, or should I say pay this tree to play that other tree. Now, you'll notice here, we have a little icon here that has a tree on it. That means whenever you play a tree into your forest, you immediately have to draw 1 card from the deck and place it in the forest clearing. So now, another card is put in here. So this is how this is the second way cards are going to get put into this forest clearing. They're going to be discarded from your hand to play cards, but they're also going to be triggered whenever you play a tree. They're going to be triggered and drawn that way too. So yes, that's going to happen. Now, how do you play the other animals in the game? Well, you'll notice, or the other plants and things, right? You'll notice these are, well, these are split. There's 2 things on here. There's a jay and there's a firefly. So when you play this, you can only play one of them. You can't play both. Because what you're going to do is you're going to have to cover up what you're playing. So if I wanted to play this Eurasian jay, for instance, it would have to go like this. That means the fireflies, I don't get any points for. So once something gets covered up like that, I don't get points for it. I don't get to activate any abilities that might have been on this part. It's basically obsolete once it goes there. But I do get the Eurasian jay and everything it stands for. So you're picking basically 1 on each of these. The trees are always going to be singular, but the plants and the animals here are always going to share a spot with another potential plant or another potential animal or insect, vice versa, right? And so if I wanted to play this wood ant, for instance, don't worry about the whole discard thing right now, but if I wanted to play this wood ant, I could play it underneath the tree over here like so. Okay? Let's say I wanted to play the bat now. I could play it over here, for instance. You know, I still have to pay for all these cards. And so I wouldn't be able to do all of this without drawing a whole bunch of other cards, obviously, taking several turns in the process to do all this. But you get the point. you can completely surround your tree like so. That means I can potentially put one more card here. Now, usually when you do that and have all four sides of the tree completely surrounded by either plants or animals, usually you can't place anything more in that tree, which would mean you have to play another tree to your forest to play more animals, right? So right now I can't play either of these because there's no place for me to put them. I'd have to have another tree. Now there are some cards that would break that rule, and we'll get to kind of what those cards might be. But you get the point. You're going to be playing cards. Probably you're going to have to do a tree first. Now if you ever have a starting hand of 6 cards and you don't have a tree, you're allowed to do one of two things. You can either use this side of a card. That means that could mean an animal, for instance. I could use this side of one of the animal cards and play it on this side as a seedling tree. And then I could still place stuff around the tree just like normal, around the seedling just like normal. But it counts as a seedling. It doesn't really count as a tree for scoring purposes, so you'll never be able to score off of this particular card here if you do that. But that is an option if you do not have a tree in hand to play. A second option is if you do end up with a hand of only animals, you can perform what is called a mulligan. And you can only do this once the entire game per player, but you can basically discard everything you have to draw 6 more cards. But remember, doing that mulligan does deplete this, ending the game sooner. So that is a risky maneuver, for sure. So just thought I'd let you know that could potentially happen. But yes, that's something you can do. And obviously you understand how you can play cards, and of course you have to pay the number of cards to play them, obviously. But there's lots of different abilities, and so let's go over some abilities, I think, just to give you some understanding of some potential possibilities here. So this forest chestnut is going to give you points based on the amount of horse chestnut trees you have in your forest. So if you go this strategy, you want to get as many of these as you can, because if you have 7 or more, then all of your trees together, all of your horse chestnut trees, all of them will give you 49 points altogether. You won't score 49 points for each. You will score 49 points for all 7 or more that you have. Okay, that's how that one's going to work. Let's see here. So then we've got the species of bat here. It's going to give you 5 points if you have at least 3 different species of bats, and that's the exact amount of different species of bats there are in this game, so you have to have 1 of each. But it does tell you that there are 3 of this particular bat as well, and I'm pretty sure there's 3 of each of the other bats. So there's a good potential possibility you could get all 3. But if you don't get all 3 into your forest, then your bats don't give you any points at the end of games. So it's kind of a risky move if you play this too soon and you don't have a second bat in your hand, for instance, to play later, right? To increase your chances. The beech marten on the other side is going to give you 5 points per fully occupied tree. So if this tree had completely been surrounded by stuff, that would be a fully occupied tree. If you have multiple trees, then it's going to give you 5 points for each tree that's fully occupied. Pretty awesome, right? And when you play it, you get an instant ability of drawing a card. So you play it, you get to draw a card too. And it only costs 1 card to basically pay to hear to play. So, you know, that's cool. So that'd be something good, right? Let's see. The goshawk is going to give you 3 points for every bird icon in your forest. So if you have a lot of birds, you'll get 3 points for each of your birds. That means if you had more than 1 goshawk, then each of your goshawks would score 3 points for each bird you have. That's pretty cool, right? The wood ant is going to give you 2 points per card below a tree. So if you have, now this could come in handy later down the road. Obviously, you're usually limited to the amount of cards you can play underneath a tree, right? But there are ways to break the 1 card rule underneath, on top, to the right, and to the left. There are cards that break that rule. normally, right? Let's see here. Let's kind of go through some of these cards and explain them. Now, obviously, some of them are pretty simple. Fireflies are gonna score you a lot of points if you have more than one Firefly. For instance, if you only have one, then they're not worth any points at all. But they don't cost anything to play into your forest, so that's something. The Eurasian Jay has this icon here. This icon means that after you play the Eurasian Jay into the forest, you get one additional turn, meaning you get to take 2 turns in a row, which means you could play another card on your next turn, you could draw a couple of cards in your next turn, but yes, it's letting you take an additional turn, which is almost always going to be useful when you play it. So yeah, that's a good one, you know, that's a real good one, right? So that might be something worth playing, and it's one of those bird ones, right? So that could help with the Goshawk ability to get you a lot of points. So if you go the Goshawk strategy, you definitely want to have a lot of different birds, or just birds in general, right? Let's see here. What else do we got? This type of tree will give you 1 point, or it will give you 3 points if your forest, as in not your opponent's forests, but your forest has the most linden trees. So if you have the most of this tree over all of your opponents, then each of your linden trees score you 3 points. Otherwise, they each just give you 1 point. This Douglas fir tree always gives you 5 points. But you'll notice something. You'll notice it has the little circular arrow, just like the Eurasian Jay did. But you'll also notice that it has an icon next to this as well, a binocular icon with a particular color. And you'll notice the color up here goes with the leaf that goes with this color. That means that if you want to do this ability here, when you play the Douglas fir into your forest, you have to discard 2 cards, exactly that amount, and they all have to have that leaf icon on them. If they don't, then you don't get this ability. You still get the 5 points at the end of the game, but you don't get the ability if you don't discard 2 other cards, obviously, with that leaf. Do we have any cards here that have that leaf on them? Well, this one has it. If you discard the European Badger, that would be one of them. But you need to discard 2, and they both have to have that leaf on it. Is there any others here? Yes, there is. This mushroom here also has it. So if you were to discard this mushroom, the penny bun, and that European Badger as well, and then obviously played this, then you would get to take an additional turn next turn. So there's a lot of these binoculars, and they're all going to have different colors on them, meaning you're going to have to discard certain leaf icons from certain cards. Now, it doesn't matter what side of the card that has the icon. It could be down here, it could be up here, it could be on the left side, it could be on the right side. It doesn't matter. But each card has to have at least one of those leaves on it in order for you to get the ability of whatever it may be. Like, for instance, the Tawny Owl has the same ability, basically, well, it has binoculars, but it's a different leaf. I'd have to discard that particular leaf from 2 other cards to activate its ability. Now, here's the cool thing. If you can't do it, you still get to draw a card with the Tawny Owl. But if you manage to do it, you get to draw 3 cards. 3 cards. 2 in addition to the 1. Amazing ability. Plus, it's worth 5 points. So it's a good card. This Stag Beetle has an awesome ability too. You'll notice it also has binoculars. That means you have to discard that type of leaf from the other cards, like maybe the Fireflies here. But you would have to discard 2 cards, right? And then you'd get to activate this icon ability, which allows you to play a bird from your hand for free. That means, you know, if I had that Goshawk that I hadn't played yet, for instance, if I had the Goshawk that I hadn't played yet, I could play it for free, ignoring the cost completely, okay? Now, if what I play has an ability that lets me do something else, like something that has binoculars on it maybe, or just, you know, lets me draw a card or something like that, you can't activate the abilities of the card you're playing for free. So make a mental note that other abilities will then also get nullified, meaning you don't get to do them if you go that route, for instance, and play a bird for free. So if I was to play the Tawny Owl for free with the Stag Beetle, meaning this Stag Beetle was on a different card than the Tawny Owl, then I wouldn't get to do this at all. I still get it for the points, though, which is nice, and I still get to ignore its cost, but you might want to save it for something that doesn't have an ability, like the Goshawk here, but also has a high cost, or at least higher than most, right? So that's a lot of different icon abilities that you might run into. I think I explained at least a portion of what icon abilities you might come across, what abilities you might activate. But let me just go through the deck, a few more cards, and kind of show you there are some others that are pretty interesting and unique. Let's see if I can find one. That's really good. Okay, so here's the Wild Boar. The Wild Boar is only going to score you 10 points if you have at least one squeaker in your forest. What's a squeaker? Well, let's see if we can find one. Here's a squeaker. You'd have to have one of these squeakers in your forest already, which only give you a point. But if you have at least one, and at least they don't cost anything to play, it's a 0. But if you play that, and then later down the road or if you've played the Wild Boar earlier, then you're definitely going to want to look for a squeaker, right? So that one's worth 10 points that way. Let's see here. Let's look. What other abilities are there? I'm looking for the frog. So let me find that frog. Oh, and then there's some abilities that are permanent abilities. So let me talk about this mushroom here, the fly agaric. It says whenever you play a card with that icon, which is the paw icon, you get to draw a card for free. When you play this into your forest, the turn you play it obviously isn't going to have any effect because you're not likely to play another card. Not likely, but maybe you are. But the next time you play this icon, you get to draw a card for the rest of the game. So if you're going the paw route and you want to have a lot of paw icons, this is going to help you out if you can get it played before you start playing a lot of your paw animals. So that's a possibility that you could potentially play. Another strategic route you could go. So some of these cards have permanent abilities as well. Cool. So that's another thing. Let's see. Let me see if I can find some frogs. Okay, here's the toad. So close enough. It's not a frog, but it's a toad. Same thing. It's an amphibian. So this amphibian, you'll notice here it says up to 2 common toads may share this spot. That means if you play another toad into your forest, it can share space with another toad. Now that's one of the cards that breaks that rule of getting to share space. But then if you have at least 2 toads sharing the same spot, then each of your toads that are sharing the same spot give you 5 points. So that means 2 common toads will give you 10 points. 1 common toad gives you no points. So you definitely want to look for some more toads. If you get 1 toad, you definitely want to get another one. And there are 6 toads. So most likely you'll find another one. Most likely. Assuming an opponent doesn't get it. Here's another card that breaks that rule. It says any number of European hares may share this spot, and you get 1 point per European hare that you have altogether. Now, that means you could have another hare share your spot with this one. You could have 3 share the same spot. You could have more than that. But if we go through this deck, you might notice that there are hares on the other side too. That means this particular hare could never share space with that other hare because it's on the other side of the card. It would be on the left side, not the right. So you'd have to find hares that are obviously on the right side, for instance. This red fox will score you points based on how many European hares you have, but you get to draw a card per European hare you have. So that's cool. When you play it, obviously, you get to draw a card per European hare. So if you have a few European hares, it's obviously going to let you draw cards. Of course, you can still only draw 10 cards regardless, right? The brown bear has an interesting ability. Okay, so we've already talked about the binoculars, so we won't go over this bottom part of the card, but the top part we haven't talked about. Well, briefly, we talked about it. So it says you can place all cards from the clearing in your cave. So when you play this, after you pay for, obviously, the card, okay? After you pay for it, every card that's in here will go to your cave, okay? So the bear doesn't score you any points on its own, but it can score you points based on how many cards. I mean, you can score points based on how many cards you have in your cave, and the brown bear is the only way those cards will make it to your cave. But yeah, that's something. That's an interesting ability. Pretty unique for the game, for sure. Let's see. Here's another one. This will be the last one I'll explain. This is pretty long video already. This is the last one I'll explain because it's important to know this. So the Eurasian jay, and there's some other animals that let you take an additional turn. This one is not letting you take an additional turn. This one is letting you take a long turn, okay? So the mole here, you of course have to pay its 2 card cost, meaning after you play this, at most you'll only have 7 cards in your hand. But after you play this card, you can immediately play any number of cards by paying their cost. So this one allows you to just take an additionally long turn. You're not taking an additional turn, you're taking one long turn, okay? That's letting you do. You could play a bunch of cards on this turn. Let's say you have lots of butterflies or lots of cards that have a 0 cost. You could potentially play a lot of cards in one turn that have that 0 cost. For instance, that's one strategy you could do. So if you ask me, that would be in your best interest. Getting to play a lot of cards that have 0s on them would be a huge help in your strategy if you want to have a lot of butterflies, a lot of fireflies, and things like that. So that's the mole's ability. Of course, you can play any cards you want that you can obviously pay to play, right? But this will definitely allow you to play a lot of those cards you might not ever get to play because you might want to play some of the bigger ones, right? And there's only 2 in the entire deck, so it's quite potentially possible if you get that card, nobody else will get it. Or if they do, only one other person will get it at most. So, or it's also quite possible that you get both of them. That's also a possibility. So, but yeah, that's not going to happen too often. But I think I explained most of the abilities, at least most of the really unique abilities that you should be able to understand how to play this game for the most part. Hopefully, I explained it well, and I hope that helped you guys out. And I hope you guys liked this video, and I'll see you guys again next time. Please leave me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you guys again next time. Man, I really love this game. It's awesome. All right, bye.